Well, let's get in there. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Of course. No, thanks for having me.
You bet. So before we begin our journey into your good work, I want to know this. 6 years ago, this pandemic changed the world, changed how we all operate. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
Well, look, it certainly changed the way everybody did things. For me, it was, um, my journey through COVID was probably a lot different because we had a drug in phase 3 clinical trials for COVID. So we were trying to develop an early therapeutic for COVID. So whereas most people were kind of hunkered down and isolated, I was on an airplane every week going all over the US to clinical sites, trying to enroll patients, set up more clinical sites. But what I learned was that we can still operate. And, there's a lot of trust we put in people that shouldn't earn our trust. And I think, we were duped to a big extent that there was this deadly, virus that was going to take everybody out. And well, that certainly it was serious. And, but what I realized was the people who got sick and died from COVID were the same people who get sick and die from seasonal flu every year.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it ended up being just a common respiratory virus. But obviously now with the revelation coming out that it was probably man-made and not a naturally derived, human virus. It was genetically manipulated and lab made. So, it taught us a lot of things. Number one, that we can still get together. We don't have to actually, a lot of people didn't go to work. We worked remotely. It allowed us to be more accommodating, more flexible. But it also, I think, encouraged us to think and to not always trust people that think they should be trusted and to question everything.
Yeah, totally agree. So let's get into the work that you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds. It's career day, and one of the kids wants to know what you do for a living. How do you explain your day job?
Well, I'm a scientist, I guess, by training. I have a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. I went to the University of Texas and at Austin and got a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. From there, I went to LSU School of Medicine, where I earned a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology. Then I did additional fellowship training. So, it's a long road. It's out of high school. It's at least, 10 or 12 years of additional training and education and learning to be able to gain the knowledge base and to build the pedigree and the credentials to really make what I think make a difference in the world. But to me, there's nothing more gratifying than a profession in life sciences. Because what I've always tried to do was understand human disease to the extent that you could fix it, understand its mechanism, and then develop rational therapies to do that. And, unfortunately, very few people ever make discoveries that translate into, better clinical care or better medicines or better strategies to, not only prevent disease, but to reverse it, cure it, and effectively treat it. So it's a long road, but you know what? I say nothing worth doing is ever easy. And but it's also said if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I don't consider what I do work because I love what I do. It's making, I believe, making the world a better place. I get emails every day waking up and people say I've changed their lives, that what I've done, what I've learned, and what I've been able to implement has changed their life. And I think it's going to continue to do that and change the world. So for me, there's nothing more gratifying. But if look for something that you enjoy doing and how you can better serve others. I think if you find that, you're going to be very successful, but more importantly, you're going to be happy in life and your career.
So when you were that age, when you were 12 or 13 years old, what was your dream job? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I really didn't know at that. I mean, like most young teenage boys, I was interested in sports. I did rodeo through uh, early middle school and high school. So, I really wanted to grow up and be a world champion cowboy, rodeo cowboy. And then I realized, as you go with it, that I wasn't going to make a living doing that. So I had to, do something else. But I'd always been interested in science and medicine. I knew I wanted to do something in that arena. Was it to be a physician? Was it to be a scientist? I didn't know which path I was going to go on. But, I've always been curious and I wanted to do something where I could ask questions and find answers to complex questions.
So take me back to your beginnings. Are you originally from Texas?
I am. I grew up in a small town in Texas, about 1,000 people. I think there were 90 something kids in my graduating high school class. But yeah, I grew up in a very rural environment outside the city. And then, for me, going to University of Texas at Austin was really a culture shock.
Yeah.
It was a big city, and I hadn't really had much exposure in big cities.
So, what was it about your growing up early on that gave you this curiosity for science, for empiricism, to help people? How did those foundational blocks become your career and your vision?
Well, I think it started when my dad had a car accident in 1984, and it left him paralyzed from the mid back down. And so I witnessed, as an 11-year-old kid, the hardships he went under, really the failure of the medical system to get him better. And he dealt with, diabetes and high blood pressure and wounds that wouldn't heal and, almost died several times. And I saw the struggles and I saw really some holes in the standard of care where we could improve. And so I think that was kind of the initial spark that, because my brother and I had to take care of my dad. And we just knew, and once I learned more and went to school and gained this knowledge, then we've been able to completely turn his condition around. But I think it was that curiosity and just seeing the failure of the healthcare system fail my dad and, almost dying from it.
So, who's been that inspirational force for you in your life to push to stay on top of science changes all the time? It's a little bit like AI, probably not as fast, but there's always these new discoveries that you have to stay on top of. And then you have your career. Who's been that person that's allowed you to love your career and to evolve?
Yeah, so in 1998, a Nobel Prize was awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide. And I was very fortunate to meet and interact with the guys who won the Nobel Prize, specifically Lou Ignarro. And he came and gave a lecture before the student body at LSU School of Medicine, and had a chance to talk to him, and he was very encouraging and enthusiastic about the field. And he simply said, if we can figure out how to safely and effectively deliver nitric oxide through drug therapy or product technology, because Nathan, it's going to change the world because there's not a single disease out there that's not associated with a lack of nitric oxide production. And so that was very inspirational to be able to meet and interact and have a conversation with a Nobel laureate. And then I had other mentors, Martin Feelish and Jonathan Stamler, and Joe Loscalzo at Harvard, and Jack Lancaster, who was at Alabama, and then later University of Pittsburgh. But these were all to me the giants in the field as a young guy starting out, the guys who had started the field, were recognized thought leaders, and they gave me tough training. They always challenged me and made sure that I knew what I was doing, that the research I was doing, making the proper interpretations of the data. And it was tough love, but I think they had my best interest at heart. And those were really the guys who I think led me down this path and allowed me to really develop the discoveries and have the discoveries and translate those discoveries into product technology, and that a lot of people have been unsuccessful at.
I come from jazz radio. I love music.
Yeah.
So I come from this world where, and I'm going to draw a parallel between science and music is that you got to find your voice. There's obviously people and discoveries that hinge on you. And when you find that, you have the opportunity of changing the world. And probably with science more than anything else. When you were growing up and you were trying to find your voice in the scientific community, what was the discovery that you think has been one of the most paramount in the world of science?
That I could generate therapeutic amounts of nitric oxide through natural products. And that was the eureka moment, right? That was the epiphany that had, wow, if I could capture this in a product technology, that I can actually deliver nitric oxide gas, this fleeting gas. So nitric oxide is a gas that's naturally produced inside the body, and once it's produced, it's gone in less than a second. But I'd figure out a way that I could generate nitric oxide gas. And then so that was the concept. Then I had to take that concept and put it into an actual product. And then once I worked with a manufacturer and I got the actual product and brought it back to the lab and tested it, and it performed as I intended, then that was the other one. And then the next phase was, does it work? Is it therapeutic? And then in 2011, we were treating a very sick patient at Texas Children's Hospital when all medicines had failed him to bring his blood pressure down, to resolve his kidney disease and heart disease. And so I started giving him our nitric oxide lozenge, and within 4 hours, his blood pressure normalized. Within 5 days, we reversed his kidney disease. Within 5 months, we completely reversed his heart disease. So those three series of experiments allowed me to go, okay, this is real. It was just, the observation that I could make nitric oxide, that I could capture it into a product, and that product could actually provide therapeutic benefits to some of the sickest people in the world.
It almost seems like stem cells. There's a level of it that has this natural healing power, correct?
For sure. Yeah, no, the stem cells, the human body has stem cells. And what was discovered in the late 90s that nitric oxide is the signal that tells our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate. So without nitric oxide, you don't get mobilization of stem cells. So you don't heal, you don't recover, you don't repair. And so now there's this whole emerging field of regenerative medicine or stem cells. But what we're trying to communicate is maybe all we need is the restoration of nitric oxide. And then that signal will tell our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate. And that's been the missing component, I believe, in regenerative medicine.
It's interesting going full circle in our conversation with like COVID, for instance.
Yeah,
The reason why it was so lethal was because it was made in a lab. But
for
at the
sure.
end of the day, I've always felt like the genius of our existence is Mother Nature. Nature has a way of healing and doing things in a way that makes sense, and it's like with the nitric and with stem cells. Our bodies, we've come so far in advancements in medicine and science. It's all coming back to the idea that our body is the true genius of knowing how to heal ourselves.
No, I agree. I've been studying the human body for more than 35 years now. And I'm continuously just amazed at how resilient the human body is. And what I've learned is that, people get sick for two reasons and two reasons only. Their body's missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to something that it doesn't need. And if we just get out of the way, if we can provide good nutrients and replete missing nutrients and remove from the body toxins, infections, the body heals itself. And the human body is much smarter than any human, any doctor, any physician, any scientist. We just got to get out of the way. And, despite all these, toxins and almost evil doings by some people, the body is so resilient that it always responds and it can always get better if we just sometimes get out of the way.
Well, and it's the simple things too, like, our body is made of water. Like, take in
Yeah.
water, right? Instead of other things like sodas and whatnot.
Noticed.
There's,
Yeah.
right, there's all these different things that just make sense to cultivate that. So let me ask you this. If you can meet one scientific mind alive today or one person alive today and spend some time with them that might help you in your discoveries and your scientific journey, who would you love to hang out with and talk to?
That's alive.
Well, it could be a ghost. It could be one or the other.
Okay. I was always been a big fan of Tesla, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
He was a brilliant mind and made so many discoveries um, and he ran into a lot of opposition and people, doing things that people thought wasn't possible. And I think he died kind of a lonely, broke man, despite the many discoveries he've made that revolutionized uh, science and medicine and electricity and all types of technology. But I'd like to know what, how do you address these? How do you better, just but I think, reading his biographies and watching some documentaries on him, he was just hell bent on he knew, he intuitively knew, and he didn't listen to the naysayers. He didn't let people,
Yep.
steal his dreams. And that's what I try to do because I've certainly been ridiculed and had a lot of opposition to what I'm doing, but I don't let others steal my dreams. I believe in what I do. I've, back everything that I do and think through scientific rigor and observations and data. And then, that allows me to move to the next step. And, I think but it's just keeping your head down and not believing the naysayers and, eliminating those people from your life.
So, in your book, The Secret of Oxide, for those out there that don't understand how this works, where does it come from? How are you harnessing this just in a very like Cliff Notes way for people to understand?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and I do highlight that in the latest book, The Secret of Nitric Oxide. But nitric oxide is a signaling molecule that's produced by the lining of your blood vessels. It's produced by the bacteria in and on your body, and it regulates things like blood pressure, blood flow, sexual function, brain function, heart function. It regulates the function of every organ, tissue, and cell in the body. So what we're finding is that if you lose the ability to produce nitric oxide, it sets the stage for the onset and progression of chronic disease. So number one, we had to figure out how does the human body make nitric oxide? Number one. Number two, when it's produced and it's gone in less than a second, where does it go? What does it become? And how does it signal? And then number three is what leads to a loss of its production. So once we figured out those three fundamental questions, then we could start developing product technology that basically recapitulates the production. So we produce nitric oxide, we know where it goes, what it becomes, and how it signals, and we can overcome all those deficiencies. But more importantly, we have to fix the reason your body can't make it. We got to focus on restoring the diversity of the microbiome. We've got to understand the biochemistry and the enzyme that makes nitric oxide and restore its function. And that's what we've been able to do through our product technology.
So, what is the motivator for you every day to continue to do the work that you do that's changing lives in very deep and meaningful ways, whether you stay on this planet or not? I mean, this is pretty
Yeah.
essential. And just beyond that, taking care of your soul and staying optimistic with odds and things that are happening. How does that work for you? What's the energy every day?
I wake up with gratitude. I wake up with prayer and thanking God for another day and the blessings and the insights He's given me for me to be able to do what I do on a daily basis. Um, but really, seeing the world is not getting any better in terms of health. Americans are the sickest people on the planet, despite being the most industrialized, advanced nation in the world. And so, what keeps me going is we know we can do better. Cardiovascular disease has been the number one killer of men and women worldwide for more than 100 years. And it doesn't have to be the case. We know what causes it, we know how to diagnose it, we know how to treat it, prevent it, and cure it. And so, my goal, what gets me going is we have to change the paradigm. We have to change the way that medicine's practiced. We have to change the way that people have access to care. And it's really just the science is complex, but the solution can be very simple. We have to understand and communicate to people the dangers of fluoride in toothpaste, fluoride in drinking water, the dangers of antiseptic mouthwash, overuse of antibiotics, the dangers of many drug therapies that are disrupting nitric oxide production, the dangers of being sedentary and not moving, the dangers of mouth breathing instead of nasal breathing, the dangers of not getting enough sunlight. So once we understand and do all that together and allow people to make really diet and lifestyle changes, and then what we're seeing in the restoration of nitric oxide, you start to get people off prescription drugs because their systems are working better. And then they feel better and they're motivated to keep going because they're seeing the changes, they're feeling the changes. And years ago when Western medicine first started, I can't remember who it said, but somebody was famously quoted as saying, "The physician of the future will prescribe no medications." And that should be the goal because medicine years ago was what we called applied physiology. Now it's applied pharmacology. And we have to get back to basics and root cause and apply the principles of biochemistry and physiology and get out of the way. There's no need for drug therapy if we understand these systems and eliminate from the body what it doesn't need and restore from the body what it needs, everything works better.
Yeah. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that young kid from rural Texas that's ready to change the world, and you walk up, and there's a film projector in the room. And at your age now, you hit play, and it's a 60-second highlight reel of this life you've orchestrated. Would that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
Never in a million years. This could never be scripted. It's not. But what I realized looking back, I realized God had his hand on me the whole time and guiding me in these and things happen for us at times and make us pivot. Things don't happen to us, they happen for us. But when I look back and all these changes and good things, bad things, devastating, tragic things happen in life, but all of it, I think made me pivot either in my career choice or even in my faith and in spiritual life and to become stronger and to find peace in fear and in pain. And I think that's but yeah, you could have never scripted my life. I would have never imagined that it was turned out how it is. But I
So let
think
me,
that's life in general.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. If you were to walk into a room of everybody that knows you in the scientific community, and you walk to the podium and you could tell them one fun story about your life, maybe the first concert you went to, a sporting experience that was seminal, a great place you traveled to, jumping out of an airplane, some kind of fun story that might humanize you a little bit to that room. What would be a fun story you would tell that group?
Well, that on weekends I'm still a rodeo cowboy. I do competitive team roping, and it's kind of when I walk into a scientific meeting in a suit and tie and this academician, it's completely different, the complete antithesis of a rancher and a rodeo cowboy who's out riding horses and roping in competition.
That's wonderful. So, of everything that you've done in your life, if you look in that proverbial rearview mirror, what are you ultimately the happiest about, the proudest of?
There are lots of things I'm proud of. Obviously, as a dad, I'm proud of my kids and watching them grow up from, infants to now, 18, 16 years old and becoming really good kids, respectable, smart, and kind of developing a life and kind of a path on their own. And, I'd like to take some credit for that on, making sure that but obviously their mom's been, I travel a lot, so their mom's been very instrumental in raising good boys. But, I think, those are some of my proudest moments is being a dad.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you: family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that everyone that delves into your world in different ways. But you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I know who I try to be. I try to be loving, caring, slow to anger, and really trying to figure out how can I best serve others, not serve my interests, but serve others and make their life better. And I think that's what I try to do. I'm very slow to anger. It's very difficult to make me angry, and no matter how bad life gets, I try to never complain because I realize no matter how bad it gets, it could always get worse. And so I'm certainly optimistic. I'm friendly. I'm approachable, and I'm here to serve others.
So, if anybody wants more, they want to reach out, they want your books, any of the good work you're doing, where's the best place to go?
Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dr. Nathan S. Bryan Nitric Oxide. Get my latest book called The Secret of Nitric Oxide: Bring the Science to Life.
Yes.
You can certainly follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nathan S. Bryan, LinkedIn, Twitter X, Dr. Nitric. But I'm searchable on most search engines. And those interested in the book, you can go to nathansbook.com or Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, wherever books are sold.
And I will make it easy. I will put all these links in the show notes. Dr. Bryan, this has been absolutely wonderful. What an illuminating look into a world that I just didn't even know was helping humanity this much. So thank you so much for taking a minute out to talk about it. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate
Yes,
all
sir.
you're doing.
Thank you.